Right, comrades, I'd like to welcome you to the meeting on Sunday of our socialism event, which is entitled Building a Revolutionary Party in the 21st Century. I think over the course of yesterday, during the sessions and the rally, obviously there was a lot of discussion on the situation in the economy, the crash, the crisis of capitalism, and consequently they are now looking to socialist ideas as an alternative to the rotten system of capitalism that we live under. And so the session this morning is going to be a discussion between the Socialist Party and the Socialist Workers Party, which are the two main left parties in Britain at the present time. Now, the person from the Socialist Workers Party is Martin Smith, who is the National Secretary of the Socialist Workers Party, and speaking for the Socialist Party is Hannah Sell, who's the Deputy General Secretary of the Socialist Party. So the format is going to be with Martin speaking first, followed by Hannah. There'll then be hopefully plenty of time. Hannah first, followed by Martin. I've got completely panicked there. And then there'll be discussion from the floor, and then the two speakers will then sum up. So, without any further ado, I'll start the session now, and Hannah's going to speak for around 20 minutes. So.
Okay, I'd like to begin by thanking Martin very much for coming and taking part in this debate today. It's a regular occurrence for us. We write to different people and ask them to come and take part in debates at socialism. And every year we write to the Socialist Workers Party, and for the last few years then they've declined to come and take part in this kind of discussion. So we're very pleased that Martin has come, and we hope that it will lead to further discussions of this type and discussions on how our disagreements, but also on what basis it will be possible for us to collaborate. Because I think that the members of our respective organisations, and also wider sections of the working class that follow socialist politics, can only gain, can only learn from the kind of debate that we are going to have today. Now, I would say Martin has come alone. He was very welcome to bring comrades from the Socialist Workers Party along with him. But, so inevitably, there is probably, I don't want to presume here, but there's probably a certain imbalance in the audience. There are more people here who are going to support the position that I'm putting than probably will support what Martin's saying. But we do want to strive for balance. We want this to be a debate. So I would really emphasise, when we come to the discussion later on, anybody who wants to put a completely different point of view to both of us, or wants to argue in favour of what Martin is saying, should feel confident to come and do that, so that we can have as balanced a debate as possible. Now, I just want to make one final kind of preliminary point, and that is that, and this is entirely our fault in the Socialist Party, in a way this debate has been titled too broadly, because it's called How to Build a Revolutionary Party in the 21st Century, and we've got 20 minutes each to introduce it. And that's really a discussion on everything. So that does create a certain difficulty. I do have an advantage over Martin, which is that, as some of you will know over the last day, we have just published in the Socialist Party a short book which deals with a critique of some of our disagreements with the Socialist Workers Party. Now, none of you, some of you bought it, none of you have yet had a chance to read it, neither Martin nor the audience. But I would emphasise I won't have time to deal with all the points that are in there today. But we would welcome that forming part of a discussion, the Socialist Workers Party replying to the points that we've made, but also criticising what they think is wrong with our party, as a debate going forward from today. Now, I know there will be some of you in the audience, and perhaps more people who've gone to the other sessions and not come here today, who are thinking, why are you bothering to write about the differences between yourselves and the Socialist Workers Party? Why are you having this debate? Wouldn't it be better if you concentrated on talking about what you agree about instead of what you disagree about? There will be some who are thinking, you're the two biggest organisations on the far left in Britain today, why don't you get together? Wouldn't it be better if you forgot your differences and united. And that desire, the kind of urge to unity, is very strong in Britain at the moment, not just regarding ourselves and the SWP, but in general. Shouldn't all of the left get together? Shouldn't we unite in order to maximise our strength? Now we understand, and we agree in a sense, with that desire for unity. If you look at our work over the last decade or longer actually, our most central demands in terms of the next immediate step forward for the working class has been and remains the question of the foundation of a new mass workers' party, an independent political mass voice for working class people. Because from our point of view, and I think that Socialist Workers Party don't quite agree with this, but we would say that whereas in the past the Labour Party, while it was capitalist at the top always, at its base was a workers' party, and millions of people saw it as their party, the working class as a whole in this country in general. Today we would say that New Labour is an out-and-out party of big business. Even though the trade unions are still affiliated to it, they have absolutely no influence over it, and we would argue they should cease to spurn the Labour Party and begin to build a party that represents the interests of the working class. And so for us, this question of the foundation of a mass party of the working class is extremely important. Now, it's taken a long time to come into existence in Britain for various reasons. There's no doubt about the potential for it, and actually not just in Britain, but internationally. In some countries, like in Greece, as we discussed at the rally last night, there are significant steps towards the foundation of such a party. The potential for it, which is not the subject of the debate today, I can't spend time on it, but in a way the potential for it has been graphically shown by what has taken place in the US in a confused and distorted way, because the enormous enthusiasm for Obama, the high turnout in the elections, the millions of American workers who queued up in order to vote for him, notwithstanding his politics, is an indication of the enormous hope and the potential for, in the future, the development of a workers' party in the United States. So we want to work together with all of those who are genuine, who are serious about bringing such a party into being. And that includes people with whom we have serious disagreements. We don't have to agree about everything else. If they agree about the need for a new party, then we want to work together with them. That was our concept behind the launch of the Campaign for New Workers' Party, which, as most of you will know, we launched in 2005. And the idea was, if you agree we need a new party in this country, sign up. You don't have to agree about anything else. We approached Respect, which the Socialist Workers Party were part of at the time, asked them to take part in the Campaign for New Workers Party. They didn't want to do so. But even then, we still invited them to speak, and they did actually speak at the founding conference of the Campaign for New Workers Party to put their point of view, because we wanted to bring together all of those who saw the need for a mass workers' party in this country. Now, I'll just add on that. Since then, the Campaign for New Workers' Party has developed. We have 3,500 supporters. We're moving towards a membership structure. However, successful as we feel it's been, it's still a campaign. It's not a new party. And what that means is that we're using it to strive might and main, along with others, for the foundation of a party, but we're not hung up on whether it comes via the Campaign for a New Workers' Party. If we got the foundation of a party involving significant sections of workers in this country that had nothing to do with the CMWP, but was on an anti-privatisation, anti-cuts platform, would take the struggle forward, we would welcome that and happily wind up the Campaign for New Workers' Party and take part in building that new party. So it's not for us about the name of the campaign, it's about the concept. Now, while we want to work together with all of those who support the idea of a new party, that doesn't mean that we think that political differences should be forgotten or put to one side. On the contrary, we think they're very important, and actually for us, one of the most positive things about the foundation of a new workers' party in this country would be that it would allow, perhaps initially tens of thousands and later hundreds of thousands of people to take part in the debates about how we can achieve socialism, what kind of party we need, what is the role of the working class. Whereas at the moment, it's only a few thousand of us that are taking part in those debates. So we think those debates are extremely important. And it's true, sometimes they can seem from the outside to be a little bit perhaps irrelevant. The much maligned word that is used incorrectly all the time on the left at the moment seems to be a bit sectarian, to be debating the different points of view of different organisations. But we don't agree with that. We would actually use the example that Lenin used, which is a bit outdated now, but the idea is that someone can seem like a madman because they're sitting by the side of the road, waving a knife around. But when you get closer to them, what they're actually doing is sharpening that knife on a stone in order for it to be useful. Now, it sounds like a silly example, but what's meant by it is the discussions and debates that we have on ideas and on programme are about giving the working class the best possible programme with which to fight against this capitalist system. To give one very concrete example about arguments that perhaps at the time seemed a bit mean, why are you bothering to disagree and so on, and yet very quickly were shown to be of enormous importance for the class struggle in this country in Britain. I want to go back a little way to the question of the poll tax. Now, there are some of you in this room who may not know what the poll tax was, because it was a long time ago, it's almost 20 years ago now. But the poll tax was a very unfair tax introduced by Margaret Thatcher, under which everybody, from a duke to a dustman, had to pay exactly the same. We recognised, as soon as that was raised, that there was the possibility of organising a mass campaign against it, because we understood Thatcher had made a mistake. She'd taken on the whole of the working class at the same time, and that it would be possible to mobilise on that basis. We initiated, first in Scotland and then nationally, a mass campaign of non-payments. 18 million people refused to pay the poll tax. We got rid of the poll tax, and we also got rid of Thatcher while we were about it, and she admits in her diaries the poll tax was the issue that defeated her. Now, at the beginning of that struggle, the position of the Socialist Workers Party was that the idea of non-payment was a mistake and would lead to the isolation of individuals and to recrimination and despair. I'm giving that as an example because it shows that these debates can matter, because their strategy would not have succeeded in what we were able to do at that time. Now, having said that, even if Martin doesn't agree with anything else I say in this speech, probably you would accept that mass non-payment did take place and that the arguments put in the early stages of that campaign by the Socialist Workers Party were incorrect. And we're not saying that no one makes mistakes, or that one individual mistake, or even 2 or 3 mistakes, necessarily matter, provided that when you make a mistake, you recognise it, you assess it, you adjust and move on, then it's not necessarily fundamental to a revolutionary party. But from our point of view, we think the mistakes of the Socialist Workers' Party go much broader than that, and are in reality a mistake not just on individual issues, but on their method as a whole. Now, that is despite the fact that there are undoubtedly many members of the Socialist Workers' Party who are dedicated fighters for socialism, dedicated fighters in favour of the working class. That's not what's the issue here. The issue is the perspective, the method of the Socialist Workers' Party, and whether or not that aids the struggle objectively for socialism in this country. I would add to this that part of the mistake of the Socialist Workers' Party is what you could call a kind of year zero approach, which is that far from, when they make mistakes, discussing them out, correcting them and moving on, there is a tendency to change the position and then to pretend the old position never existed. It's like you meet a new Socialist Workers' Party the next week. And that is not an honest method of discussion and doesn't aid the kinds of debates we need on how we can take the class struggle forward. Now, we would say that one of the reasons that we feel the Socialist Workers' Party has made repeated mistakes in the last periods is a wrong assessment of the times that we've been living through. And in particular, not just a wrong assessment of today, but of the decade that came before, of the 1990s. So, for example, John Rees said on the 1990s, it was a time when there was a general move to the left in popular consciousness. Tony Cliff said that the 1990s was the 1930s in slow motion. In other words, a period of revolution and counter-revolution, which is what the 1930s were. Now, we don't think that that was a correct assessment, to put it mildly actually, of the 1990s. We think they were characterised by a low level of struggle, a historically low level of strikes in Britain, for example, by a pushing back of the consciousness of the working class, and a certain disorientation. So, almost the opposite, in a certain sense, to what the SWP consider them to be. Now, in our opinion, and I don't have time to go into this, the main root of that mistake is related to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the regimes that existed in Eastern Europe and what flowed from that. In our opinion, those regimes bore no resemblance to genuine socialism. They were horrific dictatorships. Nonetheless, they were based on a planned economy. And when they collapsed, that represented a big ideological victory for capitalism. The Wall Street Journal at the time actually had a front page that just said, "We won." And that was the position of the capitalists. They thought they reigned triumphant, that they could do whatever they liked. It meant enormous misery for the workers in the ex-Soviet Union. There was a collapse of industry. Just to give you one statistic, to give an idea of what it meant for workers in the ex-Soviet Union, average male life expectancy fell by a decade in those years immediately after the collapse of the Stalinist regimes, as we would describe them. That shows what the restoration of capitalism meant for them. But it wasn't just for them, it was also the global consequences of that. So that, for example, there was a worldwide tide of propaganda. Capitalism is the only possible system, the only way that you can run the world. The free market reigns supreme. And linked to that came a wave of privatisation and of driving down of the living conditions of the working class, where the capitalists, until very recently, restored their profits. They were at unprecedented levels, but they did that by driving down the share that was taken by the working class to the levels that they were at the end of the Second World War. Now, we took a balanced view to all of that. We recognised it was a defeat for the working class, that under the guise of that wave of propaganda, there was a whole series of leaders of the social democratic and the trade union movements who accepted the free market, who abandoned the field of struggle completely, and that included parties like New Labour becoming wholly capitalist parties as they are today. But nonetheless, the working class's basic organisations in the trade unions remained intact. The working class's potential power to change society was as great as ever, and it would recover from those defeats. And actually now, as has been discussed in other sessions this weekend, the economic crisis has in a sense brought to an end that period that we've been through. The capitalists have had to retreat from the words about the free market and to accept state intervention on a huge scale in order to rescue their own system. And we will see in the next few years the beginnings, it's still only the beginnings at this stage, but we will see a revival of socialist ideas on a mass scale. But that's kind of a summing up of our analysis of the 1990s. The SWP, however, as I said, thought it was a very favourable period. And for them, as far as I understand, that reached a crescendo, if you like, with the anti-capitalist movement. It was described by Alex Kalinikos, one of the theoretical leaders of the SWP, as the greatest opening for the left since the 1960s. Now for us, the anti-capitalist, or to be more correct, the anti-globalisation movement, the Seattle, Genoa demonstrations and all the rest of it, were a step forward. There's no question about that. They were, in the main, a movement of the tops of the trees, as Trotsky put it, a precursor to movements of the working class, mainly made up of young people, more middle-class elements in some case. But nonetheless, it was a new generation beginning to draw conclusions that capitalism was not workable as a system, an alternative was needed. But it was on a much lower level than the class battles that took place in the 70s and the 80s. It was a step forward from what we'd had before in the 1990s. It was a new beginning. But our experience of intervening in that movement, putting the case for socialism, putting the case for the need to be organised as a starting point, was that a majority actually, of the young people taking part in it did not automatically accept those ideas, they would accept the points that we were putting forward. Now that brings me to another difference of approach between ourselves and the Socialist Workers Party. We see ourselves, as Marx put it, as the grain of the future in the present. In other words, it's our job not just to reflect existing consciousness. So for at the moment, we don't limit the points that we make about the finance system and what's taking place with just anger at the bankers. Everybody's angry at the bankers. It's our job to take it a little bit further than that. We need to link the existing consciousness to the need for a socialist transformation of society, to pull consciousness along a bit as best we can with the intervention of our programme. And I think there's quite a sharp contrast in the anti-capitalist movement between the way that we intervened and the way that the Socialist Workers Party intervened. Their main demand was simply another world is possible. Everybody in the anti-capitalist movement agrees with that. Our demand was a socialist world is possible, which was an attempt to raise, well, what kind of other worlds? How are we going to get there? And to engage in discussion with those young people who are discussing how we could change society and to put our point of view. Now, that's not a one-off. That's a general approach, and the SWP will justify it. I'm sure Martin will. For example, again, Kalinikos argued in his piece on the anti-capitalist movement that it's wrong to make concessions to the idea that the way revolutionaries differentiate themselves is by putting the arguments. And that instead, the way we should differentiate ourselves is by being the most dynamic and militant force. Now, we do not accept that argument. For us, it is not either or, you do both. And by the way, when it comes to the question of being the most militant and dynamic force, I think there's no question that the record of the Socialist Party is second to none in leading struggles, particularly of the working class. And for us, yes, we want to be the most militant and dynamic, but not for its own sake. What's critical, if you're going to win the support of workers, is to show that your programme, your militancy, is capable of taking the struggle forward, is capable of winning victories for the working class. I think we did that historically in... we did that... 20 minutes left? No, sorry, go on. Sorry. I was going to say we did that historically. Dangerous mistake that was anyway. With the poll tax, which I've already mentioned, Liverpool City Council, the struggle that we led, but also today, if you look around the country, probably in this room, or maybe he's in another session, is Rob Williams, convener of the car plants in Vistian in Swansea, which has successfully withstood attempts repeatedly to be closed down, has managed to not only remain open, but also to win improved wages and conditions for the workers there. We're also playing an important role at the moment, as was heard at the rally last night, in the fight to stop the Southampton Ford's plant closing, with the unofficial walkout that took place there last week. There are many other local examples that I could give. I would also say that nationally, we're playing an important role in workers' struggle. And I would particularly pick out the role of the PCS, the Civil Servants Union. The Civil Servants Union now has had a socialist leadership for 8 years, within which we play an important role. And it has been able, against the background in general of betrayals and retreats by the trade union leaders, it's been able to win important concessions for workers. Now, I think that Martin will not agree with all the points I would make on that, and I don't have time to make them all. But I just want to refer to the strike that is not taking place tomorrow, on Monday. Because what's happened is that as a result of a threat of militant strike action, at a time when all the other public sector trade unions have retreated from it, as a result of that threat, management have been forced, for the first time in 20 years, to offer serious negotiations on pay. And our position, and the position of every other member of the PCS executive, with the exception of the 3 members of the Socialist Workers Party, is that it is correct not to go ahead with strike action on Monday and to take part in those negotiations. That doesn't mean strike action's off the table. A condition of the negotiations is that management have accepted that they'll be able to take strike action beyond the 28 days if not enough is given. In other words, to be militant, to be determined, is not just to sound radical or to sound left, but to be capable of concretely leading struggles of the working class. But at the same time, it's not for us just a question of leading those immediate struggles. We, at the same time, always strive to link it to the question of socialism and the transformation of society. And we do think mistakes have been made in that direction repeatedly by the Socialist Workers Party. For us, it's a tragedy. The anti-war movement, at its peak, 2 million of us were on the streets of London. Probably everybody here who was old enough was there. At that demonstration, not only was the Socialist Party not able to speak, but the Socialist Workers Party, that did have national officers of the Stop the War Coalition leading positions at that time and today, only ever spoke at that and the other big demonstrations on behalf of the Stop the War Coalition. Never got up and spoke and put the case for socialism. They limited themselves to just arguing against the war. That left the field free for Charles Kennedy and the Liberal Democrats to get up and pose as a genuine anti-war party, which, as we all know, they were not. We would say there's a tendency with the Socialist Workers' Party not just to fail to go beyond existing consciousness, but sometimes even to lag behind it. We would certainly say that's the case if you look at the foundation of Solidarity, the party that's been developed in Scotland, the Border Party, which both ourselves and the SWP take part in, where the leadership of the SWP there argued against it adopting socialism in its name. Now, that was not our position. It was not the position of most of the workers in Solidarity, and in our opinion was lagging behind consciousness at that point in time. Now, I've got very little time left, so I just want to make, it is very short, a couple more points. The first is that incorrect politics also lead to incorrect organisation. And there is no doubt in our minds that the internal position of the Socialist Workers' Party is not the genuine method of organisation of a revolutionary party, it's not democratic centralism, but it's actually a kind of bureaucratic centralism. It's too top-down. Now, of course, we're not in the SWP, so we don't see it first-hand. But it does seem, in the recent respect split that took place, that the leadership of the SWP were very quick to expel people from their ranks because of political differences. And I would emphasise here, that is not the way that the Socialist Party and the Committee for Workers International operate. We operate on the basis of the fullest political discussion. We have never expelled people for political differences. On the contrary, sometimes they've even asked for an amicable divorce in one case. And we've said, no, we want to convince you. We want to continue to discuss the politics. Now, you can say, well, really, it's not your business, the internal regime of the Socialist Workers' Party. That's for them to sort out. But unfortunately, it does have repercussions for us, because it leads to a situation where people think that all socialist or revolutionary organisations organise in the same way, and so it taints us until we can explain otherwise with the same brush. But also, it's not just internally. Our experience, and frankly the experience of most people who've worked with the Socialist Workers' Party, is they use the same kind of methods in their dealings in broader formations. And that is a real problem when it comes to the question of the development of a new mass workers' party in this country. Already, in our view, we've seen two projects which were steps that were attempting to go in that direction that have been wrecked as a result of the organisational and political behaviour of the SWP. The first was the Socialist Alliance, which we founded in the mid-1990s. The SWP joined later when they decided we should stand in elections, which hadn't been their previous position. And it very quickly, in our opinion, became clear that they wanted to have a narrow organisational dominance of the Socialist Alliance, and they were prepared to force that through. We argued for a federal structure for the Socialist Alliance, to develop what it already had. It's what Bob Crow has more recently called an umbrella approach. What it means is different organisations and individuals with different points of view can keep their own programme, but at the same time unite and work together around a common goal. Now, you would think, actually, that that would have been the position of the Socialist Workers' Party, because they explain the Socialist Alliance and later Respect as being united fronts of a special kind. Now, when Trotsky whilst he talks about united fronts, he was actually talking about mass forces, so it doesn't fully apply to anything that we're involved in at this point in time. But nonetheless, one of the central things about a united front was the idea you march separately and you strike together. What's meant by that is you have your own programme, but you unite for common goals for a particular aim. In this case, to work towards the foundation of a workers' party. But that wasn't the approach that was taken in the Socialist Alliance. And I would just say there will be those that will argue, well, the Socialist Party left the Socialist Alliance, took its ball home, because they didn't like what was passed at the conference. But in fact, at that conference where the SWP's centralised constitution was passed, we were prepared to accept pretty much any other alternative. Not just our own constitution, almost any of the other constitutions that were put forward. I think there were 3 or 4 in total that we would have been happy with. The SWP, by contrast, weren't even prepared to accept a one-line resolution to say that they would not take more than 40% of the leadership, or no group would take more than 40% of the leadership bodies of the Socialist Alliance. But actually, that idea of a kind of self-denying ordinance will be critical in the development of a new workers' formation, particularly in its early stages, if there is one group, whether it's ourselves or the SWP, that are numerically dominant. So we warned, unfortunately, that what the Socialist Workers' Party were doing to the Socialist Alliance would wreck it. It was closed down. Respect came in its wake. I don't have time to go into the question of respect here, but I think it is clear that many of the same mistakes were repeated as regards a kind of rule or ruin approach. We have to control this, or, frankly, we would rather wreck it. And of course, all that remains today is really a kind of 2 shells of what respect previously was. Sadly, that wasn't just within respect, but also the attitude of the Socialist Workers' Party towards other formations. So, for example, just weeks before the respect thing blew sky high for us, you may have known about it earlier, but just weeks beforehand, the RMT in London raised that they wanted to stand for the London Assembly positions, and our understanding is Respect and the SWP approached them and said, don't do it, because Respect is the only show in town, you've got the solution. We've got the solution, you shouldn't stand. Frankly, that is a terrible thing, and you should explain if that's not the case, because what we're trying to do here is to encourage workers to found a party, an important section of the trade union movement, moving into independent political representation, should be accommodated, not kind of bullied out of the way, particularly given what happened to Respect just a few weeks later. Now, the final point I want to make is that this does not mean that we're suggesting that no new party can be built in Britain if it involves ourselves and the Socialist Workers' Party. On the contrary, despite everything I've just said, I would be prepared to bet money that we will see a workers' party in this country that involves both ourselves and the Socialist Workers' Party at a certain stage. That will be a party in which we will probably both be minorities, because it will involve a big influx of ordinary workers entering struggle for the first time. The question for us, though, is whether the Socialist Workers' Party can play a positive role in the development of such a party, or whether it will act as a bloc, which frankly, objectively, the mistakes it has made up till now have done. For us, that will depend on whether the Socialist Workers' Party can have an honest assessment of the way that it's operated its politics over the last period and start afresh, or whether they will continue with the methods that they've used up till now.